Hello and welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com, where first and foremost, we're a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself or for a loved one, maybe you're actively in recovery a little while, or maybe it's a long, long time, you're going to find all kinds of information and topics related to living a happy, successful, and sober life at Recovery Today. My name is Rob Hanley. I'm the editor-in-chief of Recovery Today Magazine. And as usual, I am with a guest I'm really excited about. It's like the only guest I ever talked to is the ones I'm really excited about, but maybe even more so now, just because of what I like and what I'm into. He played almost 10 years as a center for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. During that time, related, of course, to recovery, as you can imagine, he used pain pills for his injuries. Later, it led to addiction, which almost cost him everything. Now he's been clean and sober for many years, and along the way he started something really cool called Athletes in Recovery. It's to help athletes find addiction treatment and recovery resources. He's also a motivational speaker, which I thought really cool. But to his foundation, he's helped a lot of professional athletes and just regular, normal, everyday people to find help and treatment. So please welcome my very cool and huge guest, Randy Grimes.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and absolutely. I'm a big fan. I'm probably, maybe even more so of a fan of you, not from the NFL, which as a normal person, I'm really in awe of what it takes to reach great heights. Whether I interviewed a guy one time that climbed Mount Everest. We've had basketball players and football players. I mean, it's such a tiny percentage of people. It's so extraordinary. But I got to say, your story of what's happened to you after the league, this kind of this story of hope, is really what I'm probably the most impressed with. And you just seem like just a cool, happy guy, man. So I'm so happy to have you here.
Well, I'm a cool, grateful guy. And, I often say, and I didn't realize this till after I got in the industry and started giving back, it's almost like all those years of football from fourth grade all the way through 10 years in the pro was preparing me for what I do now, because it's allowed me to get in front of people that I maybe wouldn't have had a chance to, or helped me relate to somebody that maybe I wouldn't have had a chance to had I not gone through the things that I did, and that goes from the locker room to the crack houses and to the doctor's offices and those deep dark places that addiction takes you as an addict, much less an athlete.
Man, I love that, because it brings up a couple of things for me. And I do want to have you share your story with everybody. It's kind of my first question all the time, but that brings up a lot, because I like to think of myself as a deep thinker, and I thought about what's the point system that we have in life? Is it money? Is it how many people? What is it? What do we measure it by? And I finally determined a number of years ago it's all about influence. And influence can be money, it can be, you're famous or something like that, and you can influence people for the good and for the bad. So I always applaud everybody that's got a platform, man, because people will listen to you because of what you have done. And then that opens the door to what you're doing now. So very cool stuff.
Thank you, and I'm grateful for that platform. And, I feel like I worked for it, I earned it in more ways than one, not only on the football field, but just through my addiction and the places that I went because of that. But, to answer your question, I guess the point system is when it's all over and we part this world, how many people did we make an impact on? How many lives did we help or at least influence in some small way?
Yeah, man, I really agree. And I just never wanted to be somebody that would leave that, nobody would care, nobody would really notice at all. I truly believe everybody is valuable. And, I'm a personal development person too, so I think your past is not your future and life is dynamic and some things like that. So before I go too far down too many rabbit holes, though, tell our readers a little bit more. That was just 3 sentences. Tell our readers a little bit more about your story and who you are and this journey that you're on or that you've been on.
Yeah, well, I'm a kid from East Texas. Matter of fact, Tyler, Texas, the Rose capital.
Friday Night Lights.
That's where Earl Campbell's from. You know, he's the Tyler Rose, I'm the Tyler Thorne. But, you know, I was raised by a family. There was no history of substance abuse in our family. You know, maybe a distant uncle that I'd never met, but brother, sister, mom, dad, never saw any of them touch a drop of alcohol or abuse any substances. And, you know, my whole life centered around football. It was Friday night lights, pickup trucks, pasture parties, girls, that kind of stuff. You know, that was my high school. And I was a good high school football player. Seems like football just came real natural, real easy for me. You know, I was able to go anywhere in the Southwest Conference back then. Now it's the Big 12, you know, that I wanted to go. I chose Baylor. I could have gone to Arkansas, Texas, Rice, Texas.
Baylor's a great school, man, academically even.
And I had a sister there. And being the good Baptist that I was, you know, I wanted to make mom proud. So I chose Baylor. I met my wife the first day of school, our freshman year. I married her after our junior year, and still there was no substance abuse going on. You know, I wasn't even really drinking heavy on the Baylor campus. You know, it was still, everything was about football. And, of course, after I got married, it was about family. I had a great career at Baylor. You know, I was all conference. I was captain of the team. Everything was going good. I was a second-round pick of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 45th player taken in the 1983 draft.
That's huge, man. That's huge.
Second center selected behind, of course, Dave Remington went first. And, you know, still there was no history of a lot of head. But, you know, one thing I was always good at, Rob, and that was when I got to that locker room in Tampa Bay, I listened. I kept my mouth shut, and I listened. I listened to the older guys. I listened to the Doug Williams and the Jimmy Giles and the James Wilders and the Hugh Greens. I wanted to know how those guys were able to play a kid's game year after year after year at such a high level and get paid for it, you know, and because that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know, it blew my mind that somebody was going to pay me money to play a game that I would gladly play for free. But, you know, one of the things I learned to do very early in my career was do whatever I had to stay out on the field. And because I can still remember having those conversations with them about not being that guy who's always on the injury report, or not being that guy who's always missing practice, or not being that guy who the trainers are always working on back in the training room. You know, you don't want to be that guy, because that was a reputation you were never going to get away from in what was sure to be a short NFL career if you did have that reputation. So, you know, that's when I started taking handfuls of pain pills every day, because I didn't want anybody to be out there in my position on the practice field, and certainly didn't want anybody out there in my position during game time. And I wasn't going to get that reputation, so I would throw down a handful of pain pills every day, and I would practice through the injuries. I would play through the injuries, and at night I would throw down a handful of benzos to get to sleep through the throbbing injuries. And you know, I justified it so good. I looked at it more like a necessary evil than what it really was, and it was a full-blown addiction. So that's how I justified it. And, you know,
what did your wife say at the time? I'm just curious. Like,
just thought I was beat up. I was drained. I was tired. You know, I was coming home at night crashing on the couch. Of course I was, you know. Mm-hmm. I had been practicing. You know, this is back in the 80s. This is back in the early 90s. This was back in the era where we beat the hell out of each other all week.
Yeah.
And then we played on Sunday. Now they hardly hit at all because of all the collective bargaining agreement stuff that they've written in there, where they might have one or two pad practices a year, but back then we were beating the hell out of each other all day long, every day at practice. You know, it was that philosophy, you play like you practice. So if you're not practicing hard, you're not going to play hard. So she just thought I was beat up, tired, dehydrated from the heat in Tampa. But, you know, in the 10 years that I was there, not one time did anybody ever come up to me and say, Randy, why are you nodding off in meetings? Or, Randy, why are you slurring your words? Or, Randy, why are you asking all your other teammates for their pills? Or, Randy, why are you the last to leave the building every day and pills are missing out of the drug safe? And that's a whole nother story there. But,
Wow.
nobody ever asked me that because I was always playing my ass off. I was always playing good. And one of the things I've only recently started talking about was, the last 2 years of my career, I've had a great 10-year career. In the last 2 years of my career, I was taking so many opiates and so many benzos before games that I was playing those games in blackouts. I'd be home late at night, like 11, 12 o'clock, laying on the couch, and I'd finally start coming around, and I'd just played a 1 o'clock NFL football game on national TV in front of 80,000 people every down at offensive center, and I didn't remember a single bit of it. I'd be all beat up, scratched up and bruised up and dehydrated and all the things you are after an NFL football game, and I didn't remember any of it. So, I knew that there was a problem. I knew that, I certainly wasn't going to admit it. It was also that last year where I had my first seizure as a result of benzo withdrawal. We all thought it was surgery related, so they did all the seizure disorder test and all that, to make sure nobody ever caught on that it was from benzo withdrawal. And but deep in the back of my mind, I knew that there was a problem then.
What was the reaction I guess I probably should ask, at what point did you realize, like, I have a problem? And then maybe kind of a second question is, like, at what point did you realize, like, I'm not going to be able to fix this myself? Was it after you were out, or did you start thinking about it while you were still playing, thinking, like, maybe I got a problem?
No, I never thought about it when I was playing because, like I said, that was it was a necessary evil to be the best I could. Those kind of thoughts didn't come till later when I started losing houses and cars and jobs and relationships, and the seizures just kept on going, but by then I couldn't stop it. And, I always talk about, I had that necessary evil going at the time, but the 10 years that I was in Tampa, I had 5 head coaches, 6 different offensive line coaches, and probably 10 different quarterbacks up under me. The only consistent thing about the Bucs in the 80s and early 90s was Randy Grimes at center. But I remember Sam Weish telling me after that last game that my services wouldn't be needed anymore, and I can remember thinking, "Wow, is that how this ends?" All the blood, sweat, and tears that I've left on football fields all over this country since 4th grade. And that's how it ends. A coach that I don't really like, a coach that doesn't really like me, who doesn't have any loyalties to me, he's only coached me for a year, who's bringing in all his people from Cincinnati, puts his hand on my shoulder and tells me that it's over. And I remember just raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door. And Randy Grimes, the football player, didn't exist anymore. And the reason I bring that up is because now you throw that on top of an already raging addiction, and I've got a real dumpster fire going now because, man, I had no self-esteem, no self-worth. The depression kicked in. I fumbled around for years and years after football, just trying to figure out who I am. How do I even contribute to society when I don't have that uniform to put on anymore, or that playbook, or that locker room? That's what I miss the most.
10 years is a while. Even in today's, I don't know what the average, I think I read that the average.
2.3, something like that, yeah.
2.3. I know it varies, like, by position, like running backs are usually less and things like that, but the first thing I was thinking is, why not go to a different team? But actually, after 10 years, that's kind of tough, man.
Well, and I'd had an injury that year, and you got to keep in mind, this was 1992. Free agency didn't kick in until 93.
Oh.
We went on strike for in 1987 didn't happen until 1993, so I didn't get to, even though it cost me 7 game checks for those guys, I didn't get to reap any of the benefits of the collective bargaining agreement in 1993, and that's when free agency started.
Wow. Well, I guess you kind of almost answered my next question, as I was going to ask, like, well, what was the reaction at the time, like, from the league? Were they supportive? Or, when you did start to realize that you had a problem, was because of the collective bargaining agreement? Was there anything go back and to say, hey, this is what happened, or can you help me out? I mean, I know there's a big alumni association and things like that.
No, Rob, there was no program out there for retired guys. And
wow.
In fact, as I was going through all this, we're talking about 20-plus years of doctor shopping all over Houston. I just isolated and withdrew from not only the league and my friends and the team, but, pretty much everybody. And, I was just getting up and repeating the same insanity every day, even though I knew I had a problem. I also knew that if I didn't do something, I was going to get sick. And, it was like Groundhog Day every day for 20-plus years. And, right there at the end, it was kind of like the perfect storm was brewing in that spring and summer of 2009. I'd had a really good friend that I played next to at Tampa for many years, Tom McHale. He was my left guard, and he was doing the same thing I was doing. He was self-medicating his injuries he got while he played for the Bucks, taking opiates and benzos, and one morning he just didn't wake up. And that was in the spring of 2009, and then I'd also had a series of seizures that every one of them almost killed me. I'd had an accidental overdose. My daughter wouldn't let me come around my first grandchild.
Wow.
I'd lost another house, and I was sleeping in the floor of a vacant house that we had almost lost in foreclosure. And I can remember laying in the floor of that house thinking, wow, I'm a Baylor Hall of Famer. I'm a Gridiron Greats Hall of Famer. I'm a 1988 NFL Man of the Year. I've got the perfect wife, 2 great kids, and here I am laying in the floor of a vacant house with no utilities, and that's how I lived for several months there. And
wow.
That's when I finally put my hand up and asked for help. And when I did, my wife reached out to the NFL, and they didn't have a program for retired guys, but whoever she talked to knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and that's how I got in treatment out in West Palm Beach.
Wow.
That was September 22nd, 2009.
I was going to ask, because one of the things as we were talking before we kind of started here was that you've been married for 38 years. Mm-hmm. And your wife must have been like, maybe that's what they do down in Texas. She must have been like 12 or something like that, maybe.
No.
She didn't look like she could be married 30, and neither do you, actually, be married for 38 years. But if you abandoned kind of everybody, like, how did that go, like, with her? I mean, how was she even there? Most women would just probably split, I would think, completely.
Well, I mean, and although we were together, it seems like I was just present. I was present but not present. Mm-hmm. And, she had kids to raise. She had a job she had to do. There was many times during that period where she was supporting the family, And, she's a preacher's daughter. So I think a lot of that, the way that she was raised, she wasn't going to give up. She was going to fight for not only my life, but for our marriage. And, you got to give her all the credit. It wasn't until, and she would put me in detoxes or psych wards or whatever, and they would always just release me, pretty quick after that. I did do a 30-day treatment one time before in Houston, and, I got, 3 or 4 months of sobriety out of it. But, I blame myself for that because I didn't apply myself to everything that I learned in there. But
you got a good one, man. You got a really good one. That somebody that would
I got the best.
Would do that for sure. I mean, really, no wonder a preacher's daughter. That makes sense. But what do you think, like, is the hardest part in terms of, because you had gone to treatment several times, like, why was the last time was it because of like a rock bottom type of a thing, or what do you think about like a rock bottom? Like, why was that the trick for you?
The last time, aftercare was the difference. The times before, I never moved into sober living. You know, I never stayed connected to intensive outpatient program or to an outpatient program. I never stayed engaged in everything they told me to do. You know, I would surrender crawling in the door, but, you know, I was running on the way out. And, you know, I never engaged in all the aftercare options that were available to me. And also, the group that helped me get into treatment, you know, when I told you that my wife talked to somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, that group came in with me, and they were going to film a documentary. So I also had all those cameras on me. I had accountability. Even when I discharged, I had a lot of accountability that I had to keep with everybody, and I think that made a difference. But the biggest part for me was buying into the community, you know, buying into meetings, buying into sponsor, buying into...
So what were your thoughts before then? Like, this is all just something like I'm different type of a deal, or what?
Right, I'm different. You know, I'm a former professional athlete. I can control this. I'm disciplined enough. I can take pain pills as directed, you know. I can take benzos as directed, and of course I couldn't. I never could.
So what parallels do you see between, like, I mean, as you touched on that, like, I kind of come back to my, you know, being enamored so much by peak performers and people that do really extraordinary things, but recovery is such a fight. So what kind of parallels do you drive from, like, I mean, you're able, I think of like going into the weight room or, you know, whether it was running or something physical to push yourself, you know, kind of like, I like David Goggins, the Navy SEAL that's, you know, out there, and like you're able to dig, you're somebody that's able to really dig down. What kind of those things in your mind parallels do you see between that and your own recovery, or what were you able to pull out type of a thing?
Well, and you know, I always consider myself a pretty tough guy. I've been in a lot of battles in the 10 years and even the 4 years in college with a lot of tough, big, mean, scary dudes, you know. And, you know, I've won most of those battles. You don't get to stay in the NFL for 10 years unless you're winning most of those battles. But, you know, crawling in that door that night, September 22nd, 2009, and I literally crawled in on all fours. I fell out of the car that I was in, and there was about another 30 feet through the door, and I crawled on all fours, and nobody helped me. But
nobody helped you. That's interesting, right there. That's interesting.
Well, and I don't remember much about that night. I was so sick and broken, but I do remember hearing somebody say, "Randy, in order to get this, you've got to have the desperation of a drowning man." And I remember that, like, even today, I still remember that. And, you know, the reason that had such an impact on me then and now is because my most vivid memory as a kid in Tyler, Texas, 8 years old, I had fallen off one of those paddle boats. You know, those little one-man paddle boats that you pedal, and I'd gotten trapped on the bottom of the lake. I don't know what my feet got tangled up in, but I can remember how desperate I fought, you know, with every fiber in my body, and how I was screaming underwater to get back to the surface. And I remember that desperation. And when I heard that night, you know, it just made such an impact on me. But I got to tell you, Rob, that the hardest thing I ever did was crawling in the door that night, you know.
Is that the key, do you think, then, or the key for you was to have that kind of that desperation of, you know, somebody drowning?
Desperation is, yes. Surrender, desperation, whatever you want to call it. But I was finally at that point. I had lost everything. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. There was nobody waiting for me at the end of the tunnel. And it was either get it done then or die. I mean, I finally got to that point where either I got, you know, we hear it all the time, but I finally realized that I was at that point that I either get sober or I die.
Yeah.
And I was ready to do either one. I got to be honest. When I crawled through the door that night, I was ready to do either one.
Is TBI, traumatic brain concussions and stuff, is that one of the things that you've had a challenge with too?
Well, you know, I've had over 20 documented concussions, but
God.
I've had my brain mapped. I've had it X-rayed. My brain's fine. You know, there's
wow.
Well, I mean, I say fine. They don't see anything on there that's marked. Of course, you can't diagnose a lot of that stuff until after you die. But
yeah,
you know, I don't blame that on any.
I just watched the Tony Gonzalez Netflix,
right.
and he's got big holes in his brain, and of course he did some crazy shit, you know.
Right.
But that's kind of why I think about almost, I think everybody that played in your era, I think, look at Earl, for example, you mentioned Earl. I love that guy, but it takes such a toll.
A lot of guys that I work with want to blame all their problems on that, and of course I'm the first to shoot that down and say, hey, let's remove this piece from the puzzle, and then we'll see, how far along you are with that, and direct them to the right people. But I refuse to use that as an excuse, although it might have affected my decision-making process. I refuse to use that as a piece. I don't even blame the Bucks for making opiates and benzos so available to me, because ultimately I'm responsible for everything I put.
That kind of stuff wouldn't happen. That kind of stuff wouldn't happen today, though, could it? I mean, with all the drug testing.
I don't know that it doesn't happen some. I mean, it's improved a lot since I've been out there speaking about it. And what I'm talking about is off-label prescribing. Where doctors or trainers would pour pills in those little white dental envelopes and hand them to you. But I think to some degree it does still go on. I don't know if you remember 3 or 4 years ago where the DEA was getting on to teen doctors that were going into other states and prescribing opiates and benzos or narcotics, like to their team, because they were out of state. They were out of where their license were working. So, you've got that going on. You had the narcotics lawsuit that went on. It's still going on. It's just kind of dragging out. But we had a drug safe in the middle of our locker room, and all the narcotics were in there, and it was never locked. But just in case it ever accidentally got locked, we had 3 white guys that started on defense, and their jersey numbers were the combination to that safe the whole 10 years that I was there. I still remember that combination, but I would literally just go get out, whatever I needed. I'll tell you what the culture was back then. Whenever we would leave after a home game, and we were going out, leaving the locker room, walking out to our parked cars, our families were all waiting for us outside. They would hand us 2 beers and a little white envelope that had 2 Halcyon in them. And which if anybody doesn't know what Halcyon is, it's like the granddaddy of all benzodiazepines. They even took them off the market. So who does that? And even on plane flights home, the first thing that would happen when we got on the plane was the stewardess would come by and hand you a couple of beers, and then the trainer would be right behind you with a little envelope and whatever you wanted, whether it was a couple of Vicodin or a couple of Halcyon or a couple of both. And
wow.
if you had that necessary evil going on like I did, you would always ask your buddies to ask for their pills, and then you would get them from them.
Wow.
But that was the culture back then,
Yeah. It's pretty amazing how things have changed with marijuana now legalizing across the league. I mean, you can drink actually in the league. Always have been able to. A lot of people think that you should be able to smoke. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that happening? I kind of do, but what are your thoughts?
I know that if you have any underlying head issues going on, then that could just make it worse. So what defines addiction is anything that makes your life unmanageable. And I work with a lot of treatment centers that have a ton of beds full of people that marijuana was either the gateway or is the main factor in the reason why their life is so unmanageable.
Yeah.
Whether they can't get a job or can't get any motivation to get out of bed, if they isolate, whether. And today's marijuana is not the same marijuana.
They're like what we grew up on, man.
Yeah.
It's not like genetically scientific,
It's not that same crap we were smoking.
No, man. Probably mix a little oregano, Yeah.
No telling. So
no telling. Well, what about, I guess on that same line, like CBD is really big now today too. What are your thoughts on that for anxiety, depression, the non-psychotropic type of stuff? And, it also leads into also the pain side. Like, what do people do if you're a recovering opiate addict and you're facing a surgery or something like that you're thinking, or you got in a car accident, fell off a ladder, like you're dealing with a lot of pain. Do you just muscle through it, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I would never tell anybody to muscle through it, but I would tell them I would ask them to make their doctors aware of their issues, and then, be under their guidance and their control when taking opiates. I'm not saying that you can never have opiates again, because, eventually everybody's going to probably need them somewhere down the road, but as long as you stay accountable. As far as the CBD is concerned, I just don't think there's enough data out there right now to be able to make a decision. And I'm not so close-minded as to not to believe that, or one size doesn't fit all. You know what I mean? And everybody's route is different, but I think there needs to be more data. CBD just came on the scene all of a sudden.
Isn't it amazing?
We're all for everything.
Yeah, we're actually we're tracking it pretty closely. We started actually a feature on it. I had a friend of a friend that is I call her a white lab coat person. That she literally was a doctor, microscope at a university, and she was an expert on both opiates and CBD. I guess they're very related. And it was very kind of taboo. I didn't even know, like, God, we're going to run a feature like on CBD. Like, people are going to freak out and talk about, we're talking about pot. But now we're just actually in this same feature that you'll be in here today. We're talking about a hospital that's using, an actual hospital that's actually using it. And I've seen a lot of data, but I do think the main thing that it says, one size doesn't necessarily fit all. There's something that, everybody's different. So
everybody's different, and, abstinence works for me as far as controlling pain now. My kidneys and liver will probably fall out. Because
you take Advil or something, don't you?
Advil that I take, right, or Tylenol.
Yeah.
But, I've also come to, what's crazy is that after I got sober, after a few months, after I got sober, a lot of the aches and pains that I thought I was self-medicating went away.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have the knee and issues. I still have the joint pain and all that. And I knew I was just going to have to suck it up through a lot of that, and I have over the last 10 years, and that's actually even gotten a little better, too. And so it was kind of a miracle that a lot of that went away.
What are you somebody that is depression part of your situation too?
No, not really.
Wow.
And once I got into treatment and I dealt with the depression of losing my career, it's like I never really grieved the death of Randy Grimes, the football player.
Yeah.
And I spent that first year doing that, really focusing on that with my therapist and dealing with what depression I did have, but that was more lack of identity and self-esteem than it was, anything clinical.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because almost people that are our age, that are in their 50s like that, especially with all of the head and stuff, I would think for sure that would be something that you grapple with. How about what role would you say that that faith has played in your if at all, in your?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that was a huge part of it too. And that was a lot of the guilt and shame that I had back when I was using and going through everything that I was and losing everything that I was I am a Christian, and I was raised that way. And so not only did I marry into it even more, but my mother and my family were like that. And, for many years, it was a moral failing for me. They didn't look at it like what it was, and that was a disease. They looked at it like it was a moral failing. And, I even kind of believed that, even though I couldn't stop and I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop, why I would just keep inflicting all this pain and destruction on everybody. I just couldn't stop. And, you know, I would cry out every night to God to help me through this. And, you know, just get me over the hump, get me out of the pit, because I just didn't see any way out of it. But you know what, Rob, I look back and, you know, even through the accidental overdoses and being Narcan and being brought back, it was like, yeah, God had a plan for me, but he allowed me to go through all that so that I could be here right now talking to you.
And so how would you kind of define yourself today then, man? It's like kind of the thing I'm kind of wanting to get at is like, who are you? I mean, I've got a whole bunch of questions and things like that, and I know like the foundation and you're an NFL guy, but like who is somebody, I mean, like the real, like who are you, man?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of tough to answer, but you know, it's like, and football, for many years I let football define me, you know, who I was. And it's only through recovery in the last 10 years that I've been able to realize that football was just something that I was good at. It's not who I am.
Well, what else are you good at?
Huh?
Yeah, what else are you good at? You're a really good communicator. I mean, I'm sure I haven't really seen you do motivational speaking, but what else are you good at?
I'm good at laying on the beach. I'm really good. I'm an expert. I'm an expert at that.
Yeah.
But, you know, interventions have always been my passion, and
Yeah.
yet clear if I was licensed and all that. But no,
Yeah.
I'm not licensed. I don't even know what a licensed interventionist is.
Right.
But, you know, I have been able to go into hundreds of homes over the last 10 years and, you know, not only help somebody get into treatment, but to help families heal. And that's a big passion of mine. And ever since my wife, and even before she moved back out here with me, she was helping me do that because she's so plugged into the family side of it. But, you know, I love doing that. I just kind of, I love working with athletes. I love working with their families and helping them through a lot of the same problems that I have, whether they're football players or jockeys or whoever, you know.
Yeah, that's when we were talking, that really surprised me. I was going to ask, like, what sport do you see the most of? And you had mentioned jockeys, and I was blown away because I'm thinking, like, a jockey riding a horse is not really a contact deal. Like, what?
You don't even know. Yeah,
I don't.
Those guys are more beat up than big NFL offensive linemen. I mean, think about it. Think about how small they are, first of all. And then horses are turning over on them in gates. They're falling off of horses. You know, every time that a jockey rides like that, his brain is on the inside of his skull. Those guys, and that's not even taking into account the underlying issues they have. And, you know, there's a lot of amphetamine use. There's a lot of eating disorders. Anything to cut weight, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on, too.
Is that probably for what you're doing? I mean, of course, that's not maybe necessarily what it is, but is that the majority of what you see as jockeys, or the NFL players, or baseball?
No, I mean, the majority of players are, of course, NFL players, Major League Baseball players. You know, I get my share of MMA guys and golfers. I mean, being in the location that I am, I have a lot of golfers around here. A lot of underlying issues there, too, because it's such an individual, high-pressured sport. Rob, I see people from just about every sport. NASCAR, wrestlers, tennis players. I got female tennis players that have come through here. So, and it's what's cool is that, well, it's not cool. I mean, what's interesting is that when they get here, it's cool how similar everybody's issues are. And it seems to, you know, we always say that addiction is trauma-based, and we go back and we try to identify that trauma and we work on it. But with the population that I work with, it even goes, I can even go back one more step, and it always relates to transition. You know, we as people don't transition well out of our sport or out of our job or out of a marriage or out of college. You know, humans just don't deal with change very well. And if you're prone to be like us, first thing you're going to do is self-medicate those feelings. And, You know, it's always transition related. You know, when you don't have that uniform to put on anymore, even for veterans, when you don't have that uniform to put on anymore, you don't have that itinerary to look at every day, when you don't have a playbook in front of you telling you what to do, you know, it's just
I guess that's maybe why I was asking. Like, intuitively, I was kind of thinking, like, who are you, man? But like, one of the things that I interviewed this guy. He's a TED Talk phenom and wrote a couple great books. One was on depression, one was on addiction, named Johan Hari. And I don't know if you know that guy, but his stuff is great. And it is he's like an investigative reporter, and he went all around. And so his whole thing is that the two main factors in addiction and in recovery is connectedness and purpose. Like, and I think it kind of comes back to, like, what is your identity? So when you were a football player, obviously if I would have asked that, or even shortly thereafter, you'd say, well, I was this, or I am that. I think that having some kind of identity and something to do, what are your thoughts on, like, having some kind of a purpose or something that's hope-filled, and then having, like, not bullshit, but like true, you know, go to war type of people around you? What are your kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's all about purpose. And I wish we could give everybody walking out the doors of a treatment center, people that are freshly sober, I wish we could give them that purpose, you know, instead of telling them they've got to go out and find it, you know. What's your new identification? What's your passion, you know?
It's hard, man.
It's like, how do we resurrect lives? You know, here they are, clean and sober, but life on life's terms still going to be waiting for them when that door hits them in the ass and they're walking out of the treatment center. So yeah, it's all about purpose. It's all about, and the first thing I know to do to tell people is to go get plugged into this community. You know, go get plugged into people that have gone through this. You know, go to meetings, do your 90 at 90. Get a sponsor, let him help you guide, and you will find your purpose. It won't be overnight, but everybody wants to give back. Everybody has that inherent need to give back. And
what do you feel like your purpose is?
I think my purpose is to just, you know, I'm certainly no therapist, no expert. My purpose is to just share my experience, strength, and hope. And yeah, hope that resonates with somebody. And so far, you know, so far so good. And I think that's why God allowed me to go through all this.
One of my favorite quotes actually came from my brother one time. And like I said, I like to, you know, I probably overthink things that are just really deep. And so I struggled all through my 20s about, you know, why are we here? What's this about? What are we supposed to do? Why can't I hear God audibly? You know, why can't you just tell me what to do, man? You know? And one time I texted my brother. I said, what's the purpose of life? And he'd been in the program for many years. And he replied right back. He said, it's to give confidence to others. And I love that because it took me a while to kind of break down, like, what the hell kind of answer is that? Like, that's like, I mean, it's so, like, it came right back. It wasn't like, you know, some let me think on that, or that's a tough one. It just came right. And I realized, like, in order to give confidence to somebody else, you have to have gone through something, you know, yourself, and been able to, like, you've gone trial by fire, and then you can kind of turn around and tell somebody else that's in it right now, like, yeah, man, like, it'll be okay. Like, there's hope. Do this or do that, you know.
Or this is what I did, or this is what
I did.
People have done, right?
Yeah, man. Like, it might seem like it's really crappy right now, but it doesn't rain forever, man. Like, at some point, there's gonna be something now. So let me ask you about, like, your foundation as well. Tell me a little bit. Obviously, I think we kind of touched on that a little bit about athletes. How did you come to start it up, and what's it? You know, tell me a little bit about it.
You know, it's crazy. I stayed in detox for 3 weeks. I had such a bad benzo problem that they were going to take it slow on me. They didn't want me to have any more seizures that I had. And I remember 2 weeks into that first 3 weeks of detox, I was sitting at a picnic table and I was crying uncontrollably, man. I can't imagine what a 300-pound man sitting
I was going to say,
sitting at a picnic table in the middle of a rehab campus.
That's all that estrogen.
Yeah, it's my estrogen, right? But I used to get up every morning and write, and I don't know why I'm not a big writer, but it made me feel better to just kind of write what was going on around me, how I was feeling, all that. But this particular morning, I couldn't stop sobbing, and I can remember thinking I couldn't get over the obsession to throw down pills every day, and I also remember thinking that this is what being sober feels like. I don't have any part of it because, all that pain and destruction, that huge wake of destruction that I left in Houston, I was, for the first time in 20 years, having to deal with clean and sober. And it was tough. And it was like at that very minute, Rob, that all this was going on. I was sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't get over this obsession to throw pills down. I was having all this anxiety and stuff for everything that I'd left in Houston. It was like somebody came up behind me and wrapped a warm quilt around my shoulders. And I say that because I remember at that instant feeling weight and warmth on my shoulders. And I also remember that obsession being lifted off me right there at that picnic table. And I also remember thinking that I had to make all of this mean something.
Confidence to others, man.
I didn't know what it was going to be, but I had to make it all mean something. I had to have gone through all that for something, and that's And that's one of the foundations, the birth of it, although I didn't really do anything until I had almost a year sober. And, I just wanted to help other guys that were out there just like me, other guys that I'd played with and against, guys that were doing the same thing I was doing. I knew they were out there. I knew they were suffering in silence, and I knew for whatever reason they wouldn't put up their hand and ask for help. And that's how Athletes in Recovery was born. I started working with the NFL, with Major League Baseball, with the NBA at the time, and bringing people into treatment, working with guys. I started hiring therapists that were addiction, athlete prone or familiar. And it was just a really cool deal. And over the last 9 years, man, we've been able to help hundreds and hundreds of former athletes. But then again, I feel sometimes like I box myself in because I don't just help athletes. I don't just work with athletes and their families. I work with everybody. And, the coolest thing I ever did was put veterans and athletes together.
Wow.
And let them go through process groups or what we call the locker room. And, man, you talk about a cool thing. When those two populations get together, they call each other out. You can't bullshit each other. And, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
I'm the son of a veteran. My father was a colonel in the Air Force and been around veterans. And I got a real, I'm the guy that thanks people for their service all the time and being a veteran. The first NFL guy that we interviewed was a few years back. He was a linebacker, played after you. It would have been in the early 2000s. His name David Babora. And I saw him on 30 for 30. He runs a place in Dallas where he's got vets, amputees, and things like that. And then there's also it's high performance, so there's also NFL guys too, man. I see a lot of parallels, but kind of between the two. I'm guessing that you're a great motivational speaker. Are you also a reader? You seem pretty deep kind of guy to me, man.
Yeah, I am a reader. It's hard to find time sometimes to just kind of turn everything off and sit down with a good book. But, I love hearing inspirational stories. I love stories of redemption and resurrection. And
Rocky type of stories.
I just finished my book. And here's the
Bring
cool
it out.
And the cool thing is not that I wrote a book. The cool thing is that my wife was part of it. My kids were part of it. And the cool thing is that it was such a healing process for the Grimeses. And this is even 10 years later, I'm finding out stuff from my kids that they went through that I had no idea. And even 10 years later as a result of my addiction. So it's been a really cool deal.
So we're going to feature it. I know I saw an image on your website, but what's it called, and is it going to be available everywhere?
It's called Off Center, and hopefully we'll have it out by the summer. But what I did was it's two parallel stories. One is a fictional intervention that's going on, and through that intervention, I'm telling my story. So it goes back and forth the whole time, and these two stories travel parallel, and they intersect all along the way. It's really cool.
Really cool, man. Well, you know, like I told you, I kind of warned you up front. I'm a chatty kind of a person. I'm the guy that you'd either like a lot and you'd become fast friends with on the airplane from Florida to Seattle, or you'd freaking hate me because I talk your ear off. So, but we've been talking a while, and how can, so I'm kind of looking to bring it into it for a landing. How can people get in touch with you? And I mean, I just think you're cool as hell, man. Like, I like you, like, before we even talked on the phone, just looking you up a little bit. But how can people reach out and get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me, of course, on Facebook with Randy Grimes, Instagram at SoberCenter60. Also, RandyGrimesTalks.com.
Okay.
RandyGrimesSpeaks.com.
And who are you doing speaking for, by the way? What kind of places?
You know, I do a lot of corporate stuff. I do a lot of conference stuff. I do a lot of this industry stuff, treatment centers, you know, just about anybody, you know, and anybody that wants to hear this story.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been pretty successful in that, and I love doing it too, because I get an opportunity to meet a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And the crazy thing is, no matter where you are, what group you're speaking to, everybody can relate to addiction. You know, everybody's been touched by it in some way, either by a family member or friend or themselves. So it's a topic that everybody wants to hear about, but I think the main thing is people just want to hear stories of redemption. You know,
yeah.
They want to hear human interest stories that turn out great.
Yeah. I mean, I say it in the intro of every single interview that we do. It's the first words, I think, on our website, or anybody asks, well, what is Recovery Today? And I say, we're a magazine of hope. I see hope as like the foundational kind of cornerstone. It's before money. It's before anything. Like, you got to have hope. And I feel like that's the main deficit with people, that whether it's an addiction or it's depression or it's whatever it might be, that you just feel hopeless. And so anything that we can do to give even a nugget, a morsel of hope to somebody, just to go like, well, shit, man, maybe there is some, you know, something more beyond. Maybe I can push a little bit further, is kind of what we're all about.
That's cool, man. That's exactly right. What's the point in getting up every day if there's not?
What's the point in getting up, man? Like, I mean, what is the point? And how many lives can you impact, too? How many people can you help out? So my hat is really off to you.
Thank you, man.
We're going to put everything in the feature here. We'll put a book. I know that you got your kind of sign-up early list that people can get notified. They can, you know, reach out and connect. If you're looking for a motivational speaker, somebody super cool, obviously this is a guy. And I just appreciate the time.
No, I appreciate you, too. And I don't know if you could mention anything about where I work, but Journey
Yeah.
Pure, you know, Journey Pure is the name of the facility. JourneyPure.com is the website.
Okay. We'll put it in here as well.
Good. Well, man, I'm grateful for this. Thank you very much. This is awesome.
Really, really, really my pleasure.
You've got a huge reputation out there, and that's good, man.
I'm glad. We just want to do the right thing, man, every single time, all the time. So,
well, very
all
cool.
right. Well, thank you so much. This has been another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine, recoverytodaymagazine.com. If you hang out for just a second, I'll clear the recording.